forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings, welcome to a new episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Dace alongside my co-host and never, ever partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you again, my friend. You ready to go?
Yeah, I mean, did not expect to be completely off last week. It just couldn't make it happen. But boy, howdy, has a lot changed since at least in the West, since we last spoke.
Indeed. Let's begin there, shall we? It's official. It is Wheel of Destiny time in the Big Ten West. It has gone full ACC Coastal, Aaron. 4 teams, and until it was really 5 until the Iowa-Wisconsin game went final on Saturday evening. But now 4 teams heading into the final 2 weeks of play. 4 teams have a legit shot at winning the Big Ten West. Your beloved Hawkeyes, somehow, some way, are the team that control their own destiny after having an offense that looked like 2016 Rutgers the first month of the season, but they have rebounded strong here in the last few weeks. Then there is Minnesota, who they take on this weekend in the battle for the pig. Illinois, who looked to have a vice grip on this division about 3 weeks ago, but has regressed to the mean. It's funny, we're sitting here. If I told you in August that Illinois was going to be 7-3, you'd have been like, Brett Bielema, coach there, it's a fantastic season. Right now, Illinois fans are like, what the hell is going on around here? And then there's Purdue back again from the dead because they looked dead after the loss to your Hawkeyes 2 weeks ago. They're going to go on the road in bitter conditions with that passing offense and get a win on the road at Illinois. They might have the more favorable schedule of all 4 of these contenders, but what do you think? Let's just, blindfold ourselves, spin the wheel of destiny, and see who gets to go to Indianapolis.
After the loss to Ohio State, if you had told me in a month that Iowa would be 3 wins away from the Rose Bowl, I want what you're smoking. I mean, that is just ridiculous. But that's what the Big Ten West has mostly been. It's been ridiculous, mostly for the worse, But it's fun to watch if you're a fan of one of those 7 teams in this division, because unlike the East, where for up until last year it was just this is the Ohio State Invitational. It's at least entertaining. So we've got that going for us. I don't really have much commentary about this race because I could see anything, literally anything, except for maybe Illinois beating Michigan. I could see any of these outcomes coming to fruition. But I do agree in terms of controlling your own destiny. Assuming Michigan takes care of business against Illinois, Iowa is the only team I think that really does control its own destiny in this race, and that is crazy to say. I don't think they'll get it done this weekend. I'm not super confident in that, but it is quite the thing. Can you remember a race like this that has come down, at least in the Big Ten?
No.
Where 4 teams, you can see 3 teams and a fringe 4th one, but all 4 of these teams legitimately just flip of the coin, right, whether or not they could end up in Indianapolis.
I mean, Purdue's got Northwestern and Indiana. Yeah. Now Indiana is, of course, a rivalry game that may turn out to be Tom Allen's swan song, given the way this is trending. And if you know the history of the old Oaken bucket, you don't necessarily want to just guarantee that Purdue can win, but you couldn't ask for a better schedule than Purdue has here down the stretch. With those are clearly the 2 weakest sisters in our conference right now. Iowa's got to finish on the road in both games against Minnesota.
Well, Nebraska's
at home. Yep. Forgive me, Nebraska's at home. Yeah, and I saw Nebraska last week in person. Their defense played really good and real hard, but I got to tell you, without Casey Thompson out there, and he's a turnover machine, don't get me wrong, okay? But at least in between turning it over, he's competent, right? They're Spencer Petras in September bad on offense right now. I can't see them without Casey Thompson, maybe scoring a point in Iowa City over Thanksgiving weekend. So this is one of the more, in terms of both teams playing for the West, this is going to end up being one of the more climactic Florida-Rosedale games we've had in quite some time.
I actually think now Minnesota does have to play Wisconsin at Wisconsin, but I think we might look back in a couple of weeks and say, hey, this was the de facto Big Ten West championship game up at TCF Bank Stadium. Going to be super cold. I think the high that day is going to be in the high teens.
Wow.
And the game starts at 3:00.
I mean,
Yikes.
for those of you that are not living in the Midwest right now, it looks outside, it feels and smells like late January right now. So we're a week away from Thanksgiving, but it looks like we are in the throes of wintertime right now. I mean, that is bitterly cold, no question about it. All right, so let's go to the East. A new week of college football playoff rankings. Ohio State remains number 2. Michigan number 3. Of course, they're headed for a collision course here in 2 weeks in Columbus in the game. Are the odds, in your view, are we seeing the odds rise that the Big Ten can get 2 teams in to the college football playoff? Right now, ESPN's FPI gives Michigan better odds, much better actually, like 65% odds of making the college football playoff and only like 30% odds of winning the Big Ten, which clearly indicates it thinks that the Big Ten will get 2 teams into the college football playoff. Remember, before the season, my college football preview, I predicted an all Big Ten SEC college football playoff. It appears we might be on the brink of that, although TCU is going to have something to say about it, of course. But what say you?
So this is our Twitter poll this week, and I initially just gut reaction voted no. The odds are always against you if 2 teams from the same conference, unless you're in the SEC, 2 teams from the same conference getting in. And the more I thought about it, it's like, how can you not do that? Now, I don't foresee TCU is only a slight favorite this week. They'll be a big favorite.
2.5 against a 6-4 Baylor team on the road. It almost seems like they're begging you to take undefeated TCU. I mean, I'm not even laying a field goal on the road, right?
Yeah, so that screams out at me. But if they can get past Baylor, they'll be a huge favorite, and they should take care of business against Iowa State after that. So they're going to be going into the Big 12 championship game probably more than likely undefeated. I don't know how you would leave them out. But if they do,
I agree. If they're undefeated, they are in.
Yeah.
Yes.
But if they do drop the game this weekend, then I think that's a lock that the Big Ten, unless Tennessee or Georgia just completely screws the pooch, I can't see that happening either. I think it's almost a lock that the Big Ten gets 2 teams in, regardless of who wins the game, and then we could get a rematch of the game in the college football playoff. So. I voted no, but I actually kind of talked myself into thinking it just depends on what TCU does, but I don't really, barring a massive upset in the Big Ten championship game, which will not happen. I think it could be a lock. What a weird commentary about this conference as well. We begin with the Wild West of a bunch of really mediocre or bad teams,
and then the other division, 2 of the top 3 teams of the country.
Yeah,
it isn't. And of course, I mean that is from the fan base I represent, howls of get rid of divisions in the Big Ten. The league announced they're going to keep divisions next year because they're going to bring in the West Coast teams afterwards, and they don't want to switch twice, so they're just going to do one major format change when the West Coast branch it opens up in 2024. And I have to believe that's going to include a divisionless conference, don't you?
I don't know. You want to do pods, unofficial pods?
I think there'll be unofficial scheduling pods. Yeah, I could see that.
So as long as it's, I think it should be probably divisionless. If you're not going to do a semifinal game, which seems unlikely at this point, unofficial scheduling pods and divisionless. I mean, you elitists are going to get your way, but if I'm being honest, that's going to produce the best matchups at the end of the season.
By the way, quietly, the team up there in State College is rooting for 2 Big Ten teams to get into the college football playoff.
Because that means Rose for them.
That would mean that Penn State is headed to the Rose Bowl. And I was mildly surprised to see that they jumped up ahead of some teams to get into the top 12 in the college football playoff rankings. Why is that a big deal? Well, you could be looking now at 3 Big Ten teams in the New Year's Six. So if that were to happen, everybody kind of
Moves
moves up a bowl
Mhm.
slot in that case. So something to keep in mind. All right, let's go back a few weeks. And there's not much news here, but we should give an update with the one development we have. The tunnel incident, the fight, the melee, the curb stomp, however you see it, however you want to describe it. The Michigan Police Department there that investigated it has concluded their investigation. And they have referred it to the prosecutor there in Washtenaw County. The Big Ten was expected on Sunday and then Monday to announce its penalties and for the Michigan State players involved. And now the Big Ten is saying it's going to wait until the prosecutor decides what to do. Needless to say, again, there are howls about this from the fan base that I represent, calls of bias for Kevin Warren. Remember, his son played at Mississippi State. Remember, we were going to shut down Big Ten football, but his kid was going to play at Mississippi State. Well, after that season, his kid transferred and is now a player on the Michigan State roster. So, hey, of course, your kid is playing there, blah, 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 blah. Is it prudent here to wait for the prosecutors, or is this really separate? Is discipline from a conference standpoint, in this case, separate from what Michigan prosecutors may decide to do?
Well, if this is going the way it should, which is charges of assault at the least, it doesn't really matter what the Big Ten does. It's basically just a virtue signal, because if it's going to be charges of assault, these guys could be going to prison. So I don't think you can play. Well, maybe it is Michigan State. Maybe you can play football and go to prison at the same time. Kidding. But yeah, if it's charges.
Hey man, you watched Michigan State airlift a player out of the poke.
Yeah.
To play against your Hawkeyes one year in Iowa City. That actually happened, remember? Mark D'Antonio did that.
And I mean, this is a stereotype that Michigan State in some ways has earned. But yeah, if it's, I don't really get what the Big Ten, what would they do?
Mm-hmm. Especially because you're going to suspend these guys for the rest of the season. Well, by the time the prosecutors deliver a verdict, the season might be over.
So if there's not going to be any prosecution here, maybe that's what they're waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not going to be prosecution, then you suspend them or punish them severely, or even kick them off the team. I don't know if the Big Ten has the power to do that. I imagine they do, but that's the only thing that I can imagine they're waiting for.
So long before you were born, and even before I was born, future Big Ten members USC and UCLA played one of the most famous games in their rivalry. It not only decided who the number one team in the country was going to be, who was going to go to the Rose Bowl as the conference. Back then it was the Pac-8 champion. It also decided the Heisman Trophy. All right, I think it was 1967, Gary Beban and UCLA versus O.J. Simpson and USC. And of course, USC won. O.J. won the Heisman. USC goes on to the Rose Bowl and beats Indiana and wins the national championship. Could we be looking at that with Michigan and Ohio State here in a couple of weeks with C.J. Stroud and Blake Corum? C.J. Stroud right now is the huge, heavy betting favorite, although I'm not really sure what his resume is. Yeah. Frankly, Marvin Harrison Jr. has carried that offense this year. And one thing you do notice, man, they leave him. You saw this against your team. You saw this last week. Ryan Day leaves Stroud in there when they're up by like 30 and 40 to throw touchdown passes and pad their stats, right? But C.J. Stroud is the betting favorite right now. Number 3 is Blake Corum. Could this be for like everything? Could the most coveted trophy individual award in all of team sports, and certainly in all of college football, could that get decided in that game as well? And right now, if you had to vote, who would be your first place vote? Stroud or Corum, if those were your two choices? So
the first question I'll answer first. It should be. It should be maybe a showdown of who wins the Heisman, but it's not going to be. And I don't quite understand why, if this is just going to become a quarterback award, then just say so. Most of the time it has been just a quarterback award. Most years it has been that, at least in recent memory that I can think of. But I don't know if it was Michigan Podcast that posted the graphic of other running back Heisman Trophy award winners through this point in the season and compared it with Blake Corum. He's significantly ahead of pace. He's significantly ahead of pace. But yet this is my perception. I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to suck up to the Michigan fan in the room here. It seems like Blake Corum is getting the wink, wink, nod, nod, like he's some sort of defensive player that's like a Manti Te'o type of thing. Hey, wink, wink, nod, nod. Yeah, it's the best player. We've got our token, whatever, over here. It doesn't seem like he's a serious contender, and I don't think that's right. I think he is. You've seen him. I mean, Michigan has a great offensive line. They have a really good offensive line. But Blake Corum is doing some things that you just don't see from running backs in college football, certainly not in the Big Ten Conference very often. So it seems to me, my perception is that he's just kind of getting a couple of winks and pats on the head, even though he's, third place in terms of odds to win the Heisman Trophy. I don't know. And if I had to vote, I would probably vote for Blake Corum because, let's be honest, the type of season that C.J. Stroud is having is a dime a dozen these days in college football. Is he really that much head and shoulders above other quarterback performances? This year, yeah, I mean, sure, I guess. But historically, if this is just going to be, hey, can you put up X number of yards and X number of touchdowns, then just make it a quarterback award. Just make it a quarterback award.
Should we talk some hoops? It's early. But we got to talk some Sparty hoops, man. They nearly beat Gonzaga on a neutral site. Should have, actually. And that was the military game on the aircraft carrier on Veterans Day. Then last night, as you were taping this on a Wednesday, they beat Kentucky in double overtime. What were they picked? Like 6th or something in our league this year? And they've should have beaten Gonzaga, already beat Kentucky, 2 of the top 6 teams in the country. Brother, if that's even our 4th place team, you see Northwestern go on the road and slobber knock Georgetown in that Dick Gavitt game last night. If that's our 12th place, our 11th, 10th place team, I know we say this every year and then it almost never happens. Eventually someone breaks away from the pack, right? But could you be looking at a year where 14-6 wins you a share of the Big Ten championship?
I don't know. I don't know about that. This is the thing with college basketball every year. I try not to fall into this trap, and I feel like I do it as much as anybody, but it's so tough at the beginning of the season to start projecting out and extrapolating performances here or there. Needless to say, you got through saying it already, but yeah, that's hard to do what Michigan State has done already. So that is impressive. That's promising for them. But, it's out of conference. Once the Big Ten grind begins, it seems like a certain type of team then. That's a certain type of team really starts to dig in. And to be honest with you, so far, that certain type of team kind of looks like Michigan State. I watched the second half of that game last night as we're taping this on Wednesday, and both overtimes, and that's kind of the type of team that can really grind it out in the Big Ten. So I'd be really encouraged, but I wouldn't extrapolate across the country or across the conference. I wouldn't extrapolate too much out so far.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back, play our weekly game of Would You Rather here next. Back here on Bigger Ten, let's play our weekly game of Would You Rather. Aaron, I begin with you. Would you rather have a transfer like Cade McNamara as Iowa's quarterback next season or someone more athletic? I mean, let's hypothetically throw this out there because it's probably obvious at this point. Cade McNamara is undertaking surgery right now on his knee. He's going to transfer. So maybe we pay all back for Jake Rudock. He may end up somewhere else, but would a quarterback like that, who is kind of an Iowa style of quarterback, not a huge arm, tremendous leader of men, though, very accurate, championship pedigree. He would fit perfectly into your culture. Would you like to see that at quarterback next season at Iowa or go into the portal and find someone who can make plays off platform?
Oh, I want Cade McNamara because I think this is the fault. I think this is a false premise. Or maybe I'm just, my expectations for athleticism at the quarterback position have been so degraded this year. Cade McNamara is athletic compared to what we currently have. And God bless Spencer Petras. I said this on the podcast. I mean, to go back in there, even in wins, and take as many beatings as he does, I mean, and then still hold his head up. And I mean, that's the high character guy. But needless to say, or regardless, I should say, Cade McNamara strikes me as somebody who can at least kind of get the ball out if he's under pressure, and all those other attributes that you just mentioned. Yeah, he'd fit it in at Iowa perfectly. They still have to make some changes over the offseason elsewhere, but as far as bringing in a competent quarterback, even above average quarterback, sign me up for that.
Okay.
Next is for you. Would you rather bet Nebraska to win either of its next 2 games or bet Illinois to win the West after all?
I think I'd rather bet Illinois to win the West after all, because I think there's more of a chance of complete carnage than Nebraska winning either of its next 2 games. I'm just telling you, this is how bad Nebraska's offense is. It's so bad without Thompson in the lineup that Harbaugh decided we actually need to work on our throwing. Right? We actually need to work on the passing game. Michigan just started chucking it all over the place. Didn't really work. But they just knew they could give up possessions to turn into practice in game. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, they just knew. Like, they knew that there was no way Nebraska was going to drive down the field and have a legit drive that ended up in a painted area. I think they got into the red zone twice the entire game, okay? So I think that offense is so abysmal without him that, yeah, I think I'd go for the wheel of destiny with Illinois first.
All right.
For you, would you rather, let's look ahead. Take a look ahead at the look-ahead games before the game. Would you rather bet Illinois money line at Michigan or Maryland money line hosting Ohio State?
Looking up the weather in College Park real quick. Saturday.
Smart.
Saturday. Mostly sunny, high of 45. So
that's
cold,
pretty good. Yeah, that's good.
But that's,
chucking and ducking weather.
Yeah, but you couldn't ask for much better than that.
Yeah.
I think because of rather bet. So both of these are long odds. Okay. Both of these matchups similar stylistically. I'm probably overanalyzing this. I think I would. I don't think either of these would work. But if one was to be an upset, I'm going to put my money where I'm going to have not the best chance to win, but the best chance to make the most money. So I would say Maryland.
It is fascinating that in both of these look-ahead games, Michigan and Ohio State are playing teams with similar styles, right? Mm-hmm. Michigan's playing a power spread team in Illinois. Ohio State's playing an air raid kind of spread offense in Maryland, similar to their own. I hadn't thought about that. That is interesting.
Final one is for you. If you were a Wisconsin fan, would you rather hire Jim Leonhard as your new head coach or take your chances with a national search? Has he shown you enough? It's hard to.
He hasn't shown me enough, but he hasn't shown me so little that I want to lose him at the exact same time. You know, and that's why I thought that maybe they should have given him the job after the what was the big win they had at home? And I'm trying to remember who that was. Where they Maryland. It was Maryland.
Maryland.
I thought maybe give it to him then to build some momentum. If he is going to get the job, I don't know what the point is of holding off making the announcement. You know, you've had all the Braylon Allen to Michigan rumors and everything else, and you know their players are getting called about the transfer portal. Like, it does make you wonder if you wanted him, why you would not have made the move already. But I think I'd probably go ahead with Leonhard, but I want him to show me who the offensive coordinator is going to be.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that would be probably my answer too.
Because I think he essentially needs to let the offensive coordinator be the co-head coach, right? You coach that side of the football. I'm the defensive guy. Yep. Yeah. All right, we'll come back. Twitter poll results and feedback of the week are next. This week's Twitter poll results. Will the Big Ten get 2 teams into the college football playoff? I got to tell you, no respect from Bigger Ten fans. 66% of you said no. 34% of you said yes. And you are a maybe.
Well, I talked myself into it after initially voting no. That was just my gut reaction. I think this is a lot of people's gut reaction. But let's just pretend the game happens. Michigan wins by less than 10 points, fewer than 10 points. Okay. Are you going to keep a one-loss Ohio State team with the best offense in the country out of the playoffs, losing by less than 10 points let's say losing a one-score game to another team that's going to be in the college football playoff. No. Conversely, you can make the same argument otherwise. Are you going to keep the team with one of the best defenses in the country and best rushing attacks in the country out of the playoffs for losing by a one-possession game to another team that's actually going to the playoffs? No. So this doesn't really hinge too much on Michigan and Ohio State, what they do right now. This hinges a lot on what happens.
Other people do, yeah.
Across the country. So.
Does USC went out?
Yeah.
Does TCU went out, right? Okay, yeah. I'll tell you who's in a good spot is Tennessee.
They are.
Just sitting there at 5, the weakest part of their schedule, just rolling up big numbers, and they're just one upset away of knowing that they're in there, right? So Tennessee's in a fairly comfy spot right now. All right, the feedback of the week. Sportologian says the best narrative arc would obviously, it's obvious, he says, it obviously would be Minnesota in the Big Ten championship game against Michigan for the title, because it would be for the Little Brown Jug, for a chance to go to the Rose Bowl for Minnesota. And it doesn't get any better than that. You know it. I know it. And by golly, the American people know it. Aaron, fake news or not?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I guess. I mean, what would be the funnest matchup? I think it would be Illinois versus Ohio State. I don't think that's going to happen now. So what could be the second best thing in terms, if I'm taking my Iowa fan hat off?
PJ Fleck and Jim Harbaugh down there for a week?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be kind of fun. Now, Michigan would absolutely destroy Minnesota, I think.
Okay, you're running into an Iowa situation. They're playing our style of football with lesser recruits.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you don't have your all-star wide receiver either, and you haven't for a while. So that was going to be the X factor for Minnesota this year, and it just kind of went down in flames early on.
That'll do it for this week's episode of Bigger Ten. Again, apologies for last week's misstep. We just couldn't get it in. We apologize for that. Hopefully, though, we made up for it with double the mediocrity for you in this episode. Don't forget you can like, rate, subscribe, share, follow, 5-star review, whether it's on YouTube, iTunes, no matter how you watch or listen. Please help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. And you can also find us on Twitter in between episodes at Bigger10. Follow us there at Bigger10 on Twitter. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger Ten.